The railway was actually quite recent compared with a lot of railways. It was built only in 1919, and where we're standing just to the north of Leighton Buzzard, we're on what is called the Greensand Ridge, which is a low range of hills, goes from Leighton Buzzard across into Cambridgeshire. Underneath a layer of clay is a very, very thick layer of very pure sand, and it was for that reason that the railway was built, to exploit the sand quarries that were opened during the First World War to support the war effort. It was owned by two of the quarry companies, and they used it to transport their output down to the mainline railway in Leighton Buzzard. It was carrying hundreds of thousands of tonnes until as recently as the mid-1950s. In the mid-1960s, a group of railway enthusiasts from the Watford area were thinking of setting up a 2-foot gauge railway near their homes near Watford, and knew there was this system up here, and they decided to come up and see if they could negotiate for some track and some rail and some other equipment. And they were told, no, the railway is still operating, but if you want to come along and run trains on our railway at weekends, then that'll be fine. So that is actually what happened. They were basically given a very large train set. The agreement was that the passenger trains would run at weekends when the sand trains weren't running, as long as they left the railway in a fit state for the sand trains to run on the Monday morning. The end of sand working down into Leighton Buzzard in 1969, at that point sand traffic ceased over most of the railway. It was still used for some of the branches, and therefore the preservation group had to take over responsibility for most of the railway. And at that point it stopped being a Sunday afternoon hobby and started to turn into what has now become a reasonably serious business. We're very much in the tourist industry, in the heritage tourist industry. We offer a train ride behind historic ancient locomotives like the ones you've been seeing today, built in 1912, and a relaxing ride from the edge of Pages Park out into the countryside. And then when you get here, as you've seen at Stonehenge Works, there's a very interesting collection of historical vehicles and of course the wonderful stables building behind me. We're very much a working museum, as well as running the passenger service. We want to show off our industrial heritage, which otherwise might be lost. So regularly we run demonstration days when we operate our preserved sand quarry digger and have that loading sand wagons and taking them off behind little diesel locomotives, as would be happening 30 or 40 years ago. And on other days we have other locomotives and wagons from different industries, from the peat quarrying industry, from the military, from brickmaking and various other industries that used to run narrow gauge railways. And we have authentic locomotives and wagons from those, which we run up and down and show how it used to be 20, 30, 40 years ago. The future, we think, is very bright. We've done some market research and established that in the fairly well-populated area where we operate, there is a very large market for an attraction like ours, and there is nothing really comparable anywhere near us. So from that point of view, the future is bright. We have plans to develop this site at Stonehenge Works and turn it into much more of a working museum with much better displays and a better interpretation. We also ultimately would like to extend the passenger operation further along the line. We have about a quarter of a mile of track we're not using at the moment, and offer people a longer ride in the countryside, which is what they tell us they want. We find that our visitors to this railway tend to be very much family groups. It's parents and grandparents taking their kids for a ride on a train, sometimes the first time they've ever had a train ride, which is quite interesting. We are a railway that operates almost entirely on volunteer labour, and therefore we rely on the goodwill of obviously the 100 or so people who help us to run the railway at the moment, and of course we are always looking out for more people who want to come along and help. Whether it's one of the active roles where you have a lot of physical activity and sometimes get dirty, or whether it's one of the backroom jobs, there's a whole range of things that people can do which will help us, and lots of ways of using skills that people have or even developing new ones. The attraction of being a volunteer is that you are actually part of something that's unique. You're actually helping to preserve a worthwhile piece of Bedfordshire and indeed British industrial history into the future. And it's a very nice community spirit. You can make a lot of friends here and also have quite a good social life. Stonehenge Works Station, where we are at the moment, is out in the countryside to the north of Leighton Buzzard, quite close to the A5 road. The railway runs southwards towards Leighton Buzzard alongside a minor road into the town. The original railway was actually built quite cheaply, I have to say, and really just followed the hedgerows that already existed and also followed the contours of the land, so there are no big civil engineering structures on it. So it goes up and down with the fields, which makes it actually quite a difficult line to operate in some ways. As it comes into the edge of the town, it turns sharply left and crosses over the road that it's been following, and then goes on down quite a steep hill to cross Clipstone Brook on a bridge, and at this point it starts to get overwhelmed by the housing estates which have been built in the last 30 years or so. It runs through the middle of a couple of housing estates, and we get to the crossing loop at Leighton, which is where on busy days trains going opposite directions will cross over. That is now controlled by radio from a signalling point at Pages Park. So you'll hear lots of radio messages going on if you come on a busy day. From Leighton, it runs alongside alongside of a brook, and then climbs very steeply out of the valley at 1 in 25, which is actually quite a gradient for railways, and in fact is one of the steepest gradients on a passenger railway in Britain, interestingly surrounded by housing estates in the middle of Leighton Buzzard. It goes over another level crossing and then down and up and down again, following the contours of the land, and arrives at Pages Park Station, which is on Billington Roads, just on the edge of the town. That's where the sheds for the locomotives and coaches which are used in the passenger service are, and also the shop and buffet and other facilities. In a funny sort of way, I think that the fact that it does go through housing estates, it's certainly different, and although some people react negatively to it, others actually quite like it. The fact that the railway has been really incorporated into some of those estates, so it's now part of a green corridor through the middle of the estate, is actually quite a feature. This is locomotive 740. It was built almost 100 years ago now, in 1907, in Germany by the company Ornstein and Koppel in Berlin. It was supplied to the light railway that still goes to the hill station of Matharan just outside Mumbai, and operated there until the 1980s, when this one came to Britain and has now been restored for operation here at Leighton Buzzard. It's technically interesting because it's got a very complicated mechanism underneath which allows the wheels to steer around sharp corners, which makes it very useful for the line here at Leighton Buzzard. It's the biggest engine ever to have operated here. It weighs over 18 tonnes. This is Elf. This was built also by Ornstein and Koppel in Berlin in Germany in 1936, and it was supplied to Cameroon in West Africa, where it worked on a plantation railway for many years. And as you can probably see from the chimney, it was designed to burn wood rather than coal, so it's got a big spark arrestor chimney instead of the usual narrow chimney for coal burning locomotives. It's been overhauled at Leighton Buzzard and has been in use here for a number of years, and apart from 740 is our most powerful engine. This is Rishra, built in 1922 in Burton-on-Trent by the Bagula Company, and spent all its working life in India. It used to haul coal wagons along from a quayside into a water pumping station near Calcutta. It's one of the smallest narrow gauge engines you'll see, and as far as we know it's the only one that was built by Bagula that still survives in the world. PC Allen is another product of Ornstein and Koppel in Berlin in Germany, built in 1912, and this one worked in Spain. It used to shunt at a chemical works near Santander on the north coast. It was bought by Sir Peter Allen, the industrialist, in the 1960s and brought to England, and he subsequently donated it to the Leighton Buzzard Railway. So it's been with us now for over 30 years. This is Challoner. It's one of the oldest working steam engines in the country and also one of the most unusual. It was built back in 1877 by the engineering company De Winton in Carnarvon in North Wales. De Wintons were mostly known for building marine engines for boats, and really they adapted one of their marine engines and turned it into a locomotive. So you've got the vertical boiler with the chimney on the top, and also the cylinders that drive the wheels are vertical rather than horizontal. So the whole locomotive is really the wrong way round. It was the first steam engine to come to Leighton Buzzard after the Heritage Railway operation started in 1968, and in fact it was the first steam engine on the line for 47 years and arrived a few weeks before mainline steam operation ceased on British Rail. It's in full working order and it comes out and operates passenger trains regularly on gala days.